Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and a new Lies of P video. Today I'm excited to talk to you about an aspect of the game I kind of wish I knew about way sooner, which is throwables. As it turns out, throwables are much more than simply throwing an object and having a minor effect like the raw damage or status build up, but these things not only scale with your main damage stats, which big picture makes them very strong, but builds up a lot of status to really high numbers and has bonus effects like generating stagger. Personally, I was a bit dumb in my first playthrough. I did that thing I always do where I kind of purist it, just using my weapon, maybe some weapon buffs, and really get down the basics like parrying, you know, to get the core of the game. Maybe you're like me and ignored all these extra items, or maybe you're a bit smarter and made use of them. But the people who make best use of them are in fact the speedrunners, because they're that strong. Speedrunners make the most of the strongest options in a game to progress it through as fast as possible. And as it turns out, the fastest, best way to clear Lies of P and destroy even the strongest enemies is to make use of throwables. Naturally, weapons are still a big part of the gameplay, but using your throwables as a way to deal safe status build up or finish say 1 to 2 to 3k of health from ranged safety very quickly, they're like a very important tool in your belt. Let's look at an example. Some footage from the well-known streamer and speedrunner Distortion 2, who held the world record for Elden Ring speedruns multiple times. If you're interested in speedrunning content in general, Distortion is someone I would very much recommend. Here, Distortion is facing off against Champion Victor, one of the final bosses of a chapter. Through phase 1 of the fight, Distortion makes use of basic weapon buffing, weapon attacks, and fable arts to push the fight forward. The summoned Spectre, however, is taking most of the attention, allowing for easy DPS from behind. But as phase 2 begins, Distortion stops attacking with the weapon entirely for long periods, to begin throwing cells in this case. Throwing cells are electric blitz versions of thermite, dealing bursts of electric status buildup and damage. It scales at a C rating using advanced levels, as you might imagine, and by throwing out a few of these, Distortion is able to deal a hefty 2k plus damage, nearly 3k in the end, and actually trigger the electric blitz debuff itself on the boss within seconds, all from range safety. Then quickly throwing out a short fable art punish, since you know the fable bars were full, he backs up and starts throwing thermite instead, dealing fire damage and build up of that, triggering that burn very quickly, and again that also scales best with advanced levels. After emptying the thermites out, next was a 6th round of carcass body fluid, also scaling with advanced damage, providing acid buildup compared to say fire or electric. This all builds up to an insane nearly 10k damage sort of chain from range, fast, relative safety, and actually complete safety in that case because the boss was focusing on the Spectre. You didn't have to walk in to get glancing blows. In the end though, Distortion opts for another throwable instead of fighting normally. This time it's shot puts, which are heavy blunt balls that scale at a B rating in Motivity, but most important is that they build up stagger damage, which is absolutely incredible for a range attack. Sometimes you just need say one more stagger damage hit to get a stagger, and you could do that through a quick throwable. This is something I really wish I was doing. These shot puts cause the following stagger, which leaves Victor completely exposed, but it doesn't even matter that he's exposed, he's lost all his health already from the throwables. So for roughly 50% of this fight, the speedrunner was using throwables to completely dumpster the health pool, provide 3 types of status buildup, and a ranged safe stagger. It's kind of insane. But how did he get all of these throwables for the fight? How does he have access to these items as soon as possible? Well, of course there's going to be multiple ways, but in this specific case, all of these powerful as hell throwables can be bought as early as chapter 5. Yeah, there's a merchant in the Red Lobster building, which is actually right by a stargazer once you go through and unlock that building from the other side, and in that first room is a ladder on the right, and up there is a merchant who just sells all of these awesome throwables. Of course, in speedrunning, you'd buy specific ones in specific amounts, and then use the exact correct amount during a fight after a lot of, you know, practice and pre-knowledge for the speedrunning. But even a new playthrough could buy a couple here to always have enough to trigger, say, the relevant status. Pulling that out when you see an enemy is going to be weak to, say, thermite fire, and use them to safely damage or finish both mini-bosses and full bosses either way. Truly, it just works. Every boss fight, any combat situation, and it's really effective. The further you get into the game, the more you level up the relevant stats, the more effective it's going to be. However, I would advise you that you aggressively throw your throwables towards the end of a fight, since you wouldn't want to enter a boss fight and then use like all of them. Now the boss is on half health and then you're making a mistake and dying, and now you've wasted your throwables. So it's probably better to use them in the second half of a fight to finish a foe, whatever that means to you. But let's go further on this. You can actually beat the entire game without ever even using a weapon. Simply using throwables as your main source of damage around sure spectre summons as well, and maybe your legion arm where possible. Throwables are going to provide such a massive chunk of your damage and be so reliable that yeah, you can beat the whole game using them. I'd like to highlight this really fun video by the YouTuber Spuddy Cube, who asked the question, can you beat the entire game without a weapon relying on, yeah, throwables? Spuddy provides fantastic insight in this video on how this is possible and how it's done with all the tips, but also lots of story and lore discussion, what's really going on in Lies of P. It's a very enjoyable video. So please go check him out. Give that video a like. It will have taken a lot of effort to make that. There's a great example in the video though that I just want to highlight. During chapter 8 in the swamp, there's these two really annoying big puppets of the future who are slow and actually easy to fight in normal terrain, but here of course we're dealing with a swamp where there are areas you move slowly and have stats build up, and it can make it a lot harder. Meanwhile, Spuddy here is just killing them both from safety easily by standing in the cave where they can't reach him, becoming very easy kills thanks to the wonders that is throwables. Ideally here you'd be using against puppets, electric blitz damage, but damage is damage. Even basic sawtoothed wheels will do the job here. Spuddy successfully beat the entire game in this manner, which is both super impressive, but also another important highlight as to how throwables are super insane and how you should be using them. So with that shown and explained, let's now quickly highlight each throwable, what they're good for, and then you can know and actually consider which to use in the future. We'll cover them in the groups though, starting with the physical types, which have the largest amount of options. There's the sawtooth wheel, the saw blades, the sharp pipes, chains, cluster grenades, and shot put. The sawtooth wheels come early and probably the most common throwable in the game. You throw them to deal a bit of damage or even distract enemies to sneak up on them. Saw blades, on the other hand, are basically the same thing but deal higher damage thanks to their higher scaling with both motivity and technique. Compared to that, there's say the sharp pipes, which are like a thrown spear, scaling best with technique at a B rating in that example. Next is the chains, which actually catch enemies, letting you move up to them, or the cluster grenades, which reach a bit wider in their damage radius, kind of like AoE potential. Lastly though, we have the shot puts, which as I mentioned, deal blunt heavy damage, building up for staggers, which is a very strong concept indeed. The next selection that I'm going to highlight are the status bottle types, basically the ones we highlighted for the champion Victor fight. We have the carcass body fluid bottles, the thermites, and the throwing cells. They're used to effectively build up relevant status and trigger it and reap the benefits early in a playthrough. Normally you'd probably use these to trigger the ideal status for your opponent, enjoy the perks and damage of that, and then just fight normally. Or maybe make use of physical throwables if you want to keep going with that route. Then maybe the status runs out and you throw some more to trigger another one whenever ready or possible. As I said earlier, these scale best with advanced with a C rating, so they're effective at their job, especially early game, but they're actually not the best option for this. So lastly, we have the best status options. These are the canisters, which I think I'd describe as essentially the same as the throwing status bottle types, but with higher scaling and so are more expensive to buy. Basically, they're the acid, electric blitz, and fire canisters. Each scales with advanced best just as you'd expect, but with a B scaling compared to a C grade as before, which is leading them to their higher status build-up speed and damage overall. But yeah, that's the throwables in Lies of P and why they're just so good. You can find them all over the game, just on the floor as items or in many cases looted from enemies, but for a consistent supply, you'll want to buy them from the many different traders of the game, such as the wandering merchants in set locations. As I said before, the Malum District Merchant in the Red Lobster is an ideal trader for this, with great options for throwables on sale at this early point in the game in Chapter 5. But you will find many options, and as you progress the game, you actually have easier access to many of these, even in Hotel Krat. I hope this overview ends up encouraging you to try them out more and make impactful use of them. Just basically be aware they're insane. Once again, please check out Distortion and Spuddy for their videos and streams. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.